A very good evening to you. It is the 23rd day of July 2024. Here are the top stories tonight. More deaths from protests. 1 dead, scores injured as protesters turn up for another Tuesday of demos. Give the president time. Pro-government mobs march in the Nairobi city centre. Who paid them? Free fuel and free police pass for pro-government motor riders accused of robbing pedestrians. Shuffling the reshuffle. Ruto swaps defence nominee Duale with environment pick Soipan. And of course, on this 23rd day of July 2024, I have this saying for you. It is said that there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. Our economy has been in sharp focus for a while, but not more so than over the last month. And so tonight on The Explainer, we'll be taking a look at where we are with the economy, that being at the heart of conversations in this country. What's happening in the different sectors, and indeed what happens going forward now that there is Parliament that has reconvened, now with a possible new cabinet in the offing. Where should be the areas of focus? My guest tonight on The Explainer, Raymond Molenje, who's the acting CEO of the Kenya Bankers Association. Terence Adembesa is the CEO of the East African Bond Exchange Group. Kwame Owino is the CEO of IEA Kenya. And Donald Mogeni is a public policy analyst, all here on the program tonight to explain to us just where the economy is at on The Explainer, which starts right now.
Live from Citizen TV, this is The Explainer with Yvonne Okwara.
And Stanley Kinyanjui is our sign language interpreter. Let's begin the bulletin tonight with killings of more protesters, where 1 person was killed in Kakamega and scores sustained gunshot wounds in yet another Tuesday of anti-government protests in different parts of the country. Police opened fire at a group of protesters after one of the officers was reportedly overpowered and his gun stolen by the irate mob. Laura Otieno reports on the death and destruction of the Tuesday anti-government protests.
Maraba area in Kakamega County was on Tuesday afternoon a battlefield. After hours of cat-and-mouse games, police opened fire after one of the officers reportedly fell from a moving police car and lost his gun. 1 person was shot dead as the rest scattered for dear life. The officer who sustained injuries was rushed to hospital and the said gun recovered later. In the neighboring Kisumu County, 3 people are nursing gunshot wounds after police opened fire on protesters who had barricaded the Kisumu-Kericho highway. Transport along the busy highway had been paralyzed for the better part of Tuesday, with the business fraternity also decrying the losses incurred since the protests began. Business people called for a ceasefire between government and the protesters in order to salvage the economy.
Serikali iangalie ile ripoti yenye walileta ili wasiweke tu eti inakuwa maandamano kila siku. Hiyo ni tunawaomba. Juu hao ni vijana wetu. Serikali ni serikali yetu. Kenya ni Kenya yetu.
In Mombasa County, 1 person was injured as police dispersed a group of protesters that was attempting to gain access to the central business district. Police lobbed tear gas at the group that had been marching to the coastal town, chanting anti-government slogans. Similarly, businesses were also paralyzed in Homa Bay and Migori towns as protesters and police officers engaged in day-long battles. The protesters decried the reappointment of some of the members to the cabinet.
Uliamua eti hao watu unawatoa wote, umewarudisha. Sisi kama watu wa Gen Z hatuna wera, hatuna kazi. Tunasaka kazi, wengine unawapea kazi hawataki kufanya kazi.
Laura Otieno, Citizen TV.
Now, the planned shutdown, dubbed Occupy JKIA, failed to materialize as security was heightened at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. The regional hub was under heavy police watch from various units, with only travelers allowed access through the first inspection gate after presenting travel documents. Normal activities continued within the airport, although some flights were delayed. Our reporter Melita Oletenges reports.
Gen Z protesters had planned to march to Jomo Kenyatta International Airport on Tuesday. Their quest, however, botched following heavy security deployment. Police officers ring-fenced the international airport with heightened surveillance from the first entrance to JKIA, where vehicles and passengers were meticulously searched to ensure only travelers with proper travel documents got access. Our attempt to access the airport hit a dead end here. We were informed of an order from above not permitting journalists and non-travelers to go beyond this point. Behind me yonder is the main entrance to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, where preliminary checks happen before travelers get to access the different terminals on the other side. But today, it was a no-go zone for journalists, and with no reason given by KAA. We made a second attempt, posing as travelers. Inside, we found a sense of calm with regular activities going on normally, albeit with fewer travelers and a few flight delays. No protesters had breached the airport, but could be seen hanging around the perimeter fence.
It was just a matter of playing with the government in terms of ile game ya paka na panya. Because unajua wakisema wanakuja airport watakuwa weekend town. Hata maskari wataleta uzito pande hii. Na tano vile kutabaki bure waingie huko wakambi huko. So ni serikali tu kucheza na serikali. Juu wamesoma sana na hawana makazi na wako na hasira.
Kama ni kura yangu ndio iliweka rais pale, kura ya kwako pia ndio ilimweka mara pale. Nilifanya kazi ya pikipiki pia kumtafutia kura. So sasa hivi kiukweli ametuangusha sana, especially tukiangalia vile ambavyo alifanya juzi. Unaweza aje ukavuta mtu na umkuje umrudishe kazi.
Transport was greatly disrupted along the road leading to the airport, affecting business.
Kidogo tu ndio unaona wale watu wanaingia ni kama ni private cars. Hakuna kazi leo, hakuna kabisa. Iko chini sana. Si vile tulikuwa tunatarajia. Hata saa zingine hapo ukikuta hapa jam, saa zingine unaona inashikana. Unaona hapa nini, hata ukiona mapikipiki magari ni miwa zinakuanga mingi, lakini leo kazi iko chini kabisa. Na tukiendelea hivi uchumi wa Kenya itaenda chini.
Flights landed and took off as usual, although many travelers had to arrive early at JKIA following a notice issued by the Kenya Airports Authority about the demonstrations. Melita Oletenges, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Now, protesters engaged security agencies in running battles as the Kenya Defence Forces and the police barricaded all roads leading to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Motorists and passengers underwent mandatory screening along various routes leading to the airport. And as Seth Olale reports, the multi-security agency, which also included plainclothes officers using unmarked vehicles, intensified surveillance along the Outer Ring Road, Taj Mahal Interchange, Eastern Bypass, Old Airport Road, and a section of Mombasa-Nairobi Highway to keep the protesters at bay.
Standoff between police and protesters along Outer Ring Road. The confrontation between security agencies and demonstrators extending to the adjacent Pipeline Estate. police used water cannon to discharge a pink-like chemical in residential areas in pursuit of protesters. With the protests extending to the Taj Mall intersection, the security agencies called in backup.
Watch out, watch out.
Who arrived in unmarked vehicles. The occupants, who were heavily armed, took charge, overpowering protesters, forcing them to retreat to Outer Ring Road. The security was further reinforced by a heavy contingent of Kenya Defence Forces along the roads leading to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, including Outer Ring Road, Taj Mall Interchange, Eastern Bypass, Old Airport Road, and a section of Mombasa-Nairobi Highway. Even as the police battled the protesters, this aircraft conducted aerial surveillance. Protesters were pushing for a total shutdown of the airport to force the government into heeding the demands. Until late Tuesday, the Maltese security agency kept vigil along the Outer Ring Road, Taj Mall Interchange, Eastern Bypass, Old Airport Road, and a section of Mombasa-Nairobi Highway to keep protesters at bay. Seth Olale, Citizen TV.
Now, protesters on motorbikes invaded Nairobi's central business district in support of the government during today's anti-government protests. The protesters appear to have been well organized and mobilized to counter the anti-government protesters. The group later clashed with other motorbike taxi operators before they were run out of the CBD. Brenda Wanga reports that the pro-government protesters had easy access to the CBD, with police virtually standing by and allowing them to carry on with their activities.
They were first observed at different fueling stations in the CBD. Scores of young men on their motorbikes appearing to congregate around vehicles whose occupants also appeared to be coordinating this day's activities. They seemed to be preparing for a mission, and soon after, that mission became clear. In an organized manner, the group then made its way into the center of the capital, riding on their borders, honking, whistling and chanting pro-government slogans. The placards they carried also showing their intention to counter any anti-government protests that had been anticipated in the city. In a break from previous demonstrations, the pro-government protesters were able to access the CBD with little to no hindrance from pockets of police officers who had been dispatched to the CBD. They moved from street to street with almost reckless abandon. That is until another group of boda operators based in the CBD came face to face with them. The CBD bodas accusing the pro-government group of looting. A confrontation ensued, leaving several people injured and at least 2 motorbikes burnt to near ashes. The pro-government protesters eventually departed from the CBD nearly after an hour. They were seen riding towards the outskirts of the city, their mission appearing to have been accomplished. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV.
Now, soon after the goons exited the central business district, hundreds of Gen Zs poured out onto the streets of Nairobi. Unlike previous protests where the group was dispersed by police using tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets and even live bullets, this time round, police watched from a distance as they went about their business. Nairobi Police Commander Adamson Bungei, who has been on the receiving end over police successes around the city, was among officers who interacted with the protesters.
Nairobi Central Business District, youths who support the anti-government protests gathered in numbers, armed with the national flags, water bottles and phones, as it has been the norm. They took charge along major streets in the city, singing and dancing as they castigated the government over rampant corruption and poor governance. But unlike previous protests, where security officers used all manner of force to keep them off the streets by using tear gas, water cannons and even bullets, this time round police offered round-the-clock security, driving in their midst. Others watched them from a distance as they roamed around the CBD. Nairobi Police Commander Adamson Bungei, who has been in the eye of storm over police excesses, was also captured interacting with the protesters in the city center. The protesters later converged at Dedan Kimathi's statue, where they honored his struggle to see Kenya attain independence by applying makeup on his face and giving him a whistle to blow. However, in the evening, police lobbed tear gas at the protesters to disperse them. The protesters slowed down business within the CBD as most traders remained at home. Shops remained closed, with a few matatu operators accessing the city center to ferry passengers into and out of the capital city.
A story was produced by Njoroge Gatete. Now, still on the protests around the country, chaos and running battles marred demonstrations in Kisii County led by the youth, following the sudden emergence of a group of armed youth who tried to flash out protesters from Kisii's central business district, literally turning Kisii town into a volatile area. In the neighboring Nyamira County, transport was paralyzed after protesters took to the streets demanding ouster of Governor Amos Nyaribo due to what they called underperformance and skyrocketing cases of corruption. Crispin Otieno with the day-long happenings in the Gusii region.
In yet another cycle of anti-government protest in the country, youth from Kisii County showed up yet again in solidarity with their colleagues across the country to express their displeasure with the current state of the nation, calling for a total reboot of the Kenya Kwanza administration. Matters, however, got heated after these youthful men armed with machetes descended on protesters. The armed men visiting tear down the protesters before they were overpowered. For nearly 15 minutes, the armed gang had to flee angry youth who repulsed them after fierce engagement within Kisii CBD.
Tunatetea mwananchi, maisha imekuwa juu. Hata askari wanakuja hapa, hawa tujini watu wagani na mabanga, wanakuja na marungu, wanakuja kutuua.
Hatuna shida bro, lakini tumekuja na mapanga na marungu, tujue shida iko wapi. Mbona sasa mimi niko na frimbi bro na protect. Sawa.
Some of the demonstrators had a message for the government.
Kuna majenzi na vijana wabaya wajaingia serikali kulipwa 1500 kwa mwezi. Lakini hao watu wamefanya kazi kwa miaka kupita 15, 20 wako serikalini.
In Nyamira, the town was in turmoil. Hundreds of youth protested, demanding immediate ouster of the area governor for giving a deaf ear to their plight. The protesters barricaded major roads and lit bonfires to show their dissatisfaction with the skyrocketing cases of corruption and misuse of the governor's office to their detriment.
Sisi hatukupigi, hatukuwa tunakurusha. Mbona wewe haufiki mahali vijana wako, vijana piga nduru.
Hii kazi yetu tulikupa. Tafadhali hebu tufanyie kazi. Kama rais mwenyewe anakataa financial bill. Wewe ni nani wewe Nyaribo wewe?
At some point, it turned into a running battle between demonstrators and the police, leading to the arrest of more than 5 men.
Kinatendeka leo naona hii nasikia pa kankiwaenda kuingia kaona ni ng'ombe uko chini. Ni tu gani? Ni tia gasi. Tia gasi ikaua hii ng'ombe.
The Gen Z from the vast Gusii region promised to make yet another comeback next week to demand for their rights. Crispin Otieno, Citizen TV, Kisii.
Now, as promised you, our conversation tonight is about the economy. Where are we at? What is happening within the different sectors? And of course, what does this mean going forward? Parliament is back in session. That'll be one of the major items on the agenda. A new cabinet in the offing. Where are we now? Where do we need to be and how do we get there? My guests are already here. I'll be introducing you to Donald Mogeni, who is joining us live from Migori County this evening. But let me start with my guests here in studio. Kwame, I'd like to begin with you. What's your assessment of the economy today? A lot has happened this year. Even more has happened in the last month. But what's your assessment of where we are today?
Okay, I mean, far from ideal, right? I mean, this should have been a question. I mean, the budget should have been done, dusted, and we'd be looking at the implementation, but we seem to be marching on the spot, and it's not a nice spot. So obviously far from ideal, and the unfortunate thing is it could get worse.
Yeah, and we'll talk about what the scenarios look like and perhaps how to avert the worst case scenario and perhaps get us back on track. Raymond, the last time we spoke with you here, it was the public participation exercise ahead of the finance bill. A lot of water under the bridge since then. What's your assessment now?
I can say we are currently at a rebirth moment as a country. So economically, what we are looking at is just self-reflection as a country, and then both government, private sector, household, and even at an individual level. And I look at three things. So one is we need to manage our expenses quite well, live within our means, all levels, government, private sector, households, and individuals. Number two, we just need to stop theft. And number three, we need to live within the law. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting. And we'll come and talk a little bit more about that. Terence, you're in the markets space.
Yes.
What is that looking like, particularly the issue of debt?
Well, currently, you know that while on the secondary markets, there's been an enhanced trading volumes, of course, not necessarily reflective of the general economy, but there's a number of concerns that prohibit a much better functioning market. And so, you know, we're at that point, as Raymond is saying, that a proper discussion needs to be had to address those key concerns. What, for example, in the secondary debt markets need to be done to then help to support government in terms of a primary issuance, refinancing of debt, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And we'll come back and talk very interestingly about that bond that was, you know, offered by the government and was heavily undersubscribed. What is the sentiment in the market? Why aren't they taking that? It had a very attractive interest rate, didn't it? Close to 18%. But, you know, it would seem investors are shying away from longer-term relationships with the government and opting for perhaps a bit more short-term cash in, cash out. Yeah. And so we'll talk about that and, you know, what that says, not just domestically, but perhaps internationally as well, including, you know, other things like there's an organization called Moody's. We reported about that, and they didn't have quite a good outlook about this country. Now, Raymond Molenje, who's here with us, talked about living within our means at all levels of government. Donald Mogeni, who's joining me, is in the counties tonight. It would seem, Donald, the counties are also going to have to tighten their belts.
Yes, indeed, I think, and you know, the scenes we've seen today from counties like Nyamira, you know, where, you know, the Gen Zs are already starting to protest against county governments. So we expect that we will see the decentralization of those protests. And, you know, just like the national government needs to, I think county governments will also need to significantly address those fiscal and governance challenges that, you know, we've seen in so many reports over the years. So without a doubt, I think so much needs to be done at national level, but just as much within counties as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Donald. We'll come back and have this entire conversation with all of you gentlemen. We'll get a little bit deeper into those issues. Let's take our first break here on The Explainer tonight. When we come back, more of this conversation. The hashtag is The Explainer at Citizen TV Kenya, at Yvonne Okwara. Looking forward to your thoughts and any questions you have for our panelists. Which way for the Kenyan economy? Back in a moment. All right, don't forget, we will come back to our conversation on the state of Kenya's economy that is in sharp focus at the moment. Let's continue to update you on the protests happening around the country. Now, protected areas that were targeted by protesters will remain under high security surveillance with limited access to avoid trespassing. Acting Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja says no protester will be allowed to access these areas as they are out of bounds. In a press briefing, Kanja warned those who may break the law will be dealt with in the event they trespass the listed areas. Some of the listed protected areas include the LPG plant, the bitumen plant and petroleum depots situated at the Embakasi Aviation Depot at the JKIA. The police IG also appealed to members of the public to remain vigilant in crowded areas.
Si mambo sawa na hatutaikubalia. Kuenda kuingia kwa kiwanja ya ndege huko na hujapata ruhusa ya kuingia huko haitakubalika. Nataka kukumbusha Wakenya wote, hatuna nchi nyingine inaitwa Kenya, ni hii peke yake tuko naye. Na sisi wote tuko na jukumu ya kuona ya kwamba nchi yetu iko sawasawa na iko na amani ya kutosha. Kwa hivyo mimi nawaomba na wauliza ya kwamba tujukumike sisi wote, tukijua ya kwamba hatuna mahali ingine, ni hii tu, hii ndio nchi yetu, hii Kenya. Hatuna Kenya ingine, iko mahali ingine. Kwa hivyo sisi wote tuichunge na tuiride kama vile wimbo yetu ya taifa yetu inasema, na tukifanya namna hiyo kila mmoja yetu atakuwa ako sawa.
Now, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Renson Mulele Ingonga, says it has proved difficult to identify and prosecute the killers of the 50 Kenyans killed in the anti-government protests. The DPP says no one has offered to record witness statements over the killings, including that of Rex Kanyeki Masai. As Willie Lusige now reports, the DPP now wants those with information to step forward and record statements.
While confirming receipt of 4 files from the Independent Police Oversight Authority, IPOA, on alleged killings of protesters by police, in the Rex Kanyeki Masai case was allegedly felled by a police officer on June 20th, the ODPP office says it has proved to proceed with the case as no one has come forward to record statements.
The people who took Rex Kanyeki Masai to hospital have not come forward to record statements, including the key witness who was with the deceased during the shooting and who informed the deceased parents after the incident.
The second file being that of injuries allegedly inflicted by police on Dominic Wanjala Mutua, in which the DPP has directed a ballistic report be availed. On the death of Evans Kiratu Karobia, another protester who died while undergoing treatment at Kenyatta National Hospital, the DPP says investigations indicate that the victim died due to blunt force trauma, but no person has recorded any statement so far.
I note that the main suspect in that case denied ever firing a tear gas canister at the victim, and I direct that further investigations be conducted to authenticate the video and a report submitted by the Communications Authority of Kenya.
The last file being that of shooting of Gianna Makelo Bonyo, who suffered gunshot at the lower back while riding a bicycle in her parents' compound.
He was admitted at the Kenyatta National Hospital and underwent surgery to remove the bullet. I shall review the case and make further directions once the investigation file is resubmitted with the ballistic report.
The DPP is now calling on key witnesses in any of these cases to record statement with relevant authorities promising witness protection. The DPP also blasted IPOA for not providing sufficient evidence.
We are forwarding the files back to IPOA to cover the areas that are not covered, so that we can be able to come up with conclusive review. It means we return files where we see there is some evidence that is missing and can be found.
With more than 50 cases of death recorded in relation to the current anti-government protests, the Office of the Directorate of Public Prosecution is now calling on key witnesses to come out so as those families that have been affected may end up getting the justice that they deserve. Willie Lusige, Citizen TV, at the Office of the DPP.
All right, from Kenya, let's focus on our neighbors. Ugandan security forces have detained a number of youthful protesters who took part in anti-corruption demos and tried to access parliament buildings within the capital, Kampala. The protesters, whose mission was to occupy parliament, was thwarted by heavy security presence, demanding that the Speaker of Parliament, Anita Among, resign. Emily Chebet reports.
Dozens of young Ugandan protesters were on the streets of Kampala protesting against what they have termed as high levels of corruption will spend the night in police custody. The youthful Ugandans tried what their Kenyan counterparts did a few weeks ago by marching towards parliament buildings in the capital, Kampala. But their plans were thwarted by heavy security presence in various parts of the country's capital. The demonstrators, who were carrying placards, chanted slogans demanding the resignation of Uganda's National Assembly Speaker Anita Among over claims of corruption. The young generation were participating in what the Ugandan government called illegal protests, following a warning from security forces and the country's president Yoweri Kaguta Museveni against the planned demos. Ugandan authorities said they had banned the protests, citing intelligence which they say showed criminal-minded youth were in to hijack the demos to loot and vandalize. Several Ugandan media houses have reported that several plainclothes policemen and women were spotted arresting protesters who were determined to occupy parliament buildings. Similar scenarios have been witnessed across Kenya in the last few weeks during the Gen Z-led demos, though on a much larger scale. Young Ugandans have been mobilizing support online. Monday evening, Uganda's opposition leader Bobi Wine said security forces had surrounded the headquarters of his party ahead of today's anti-government demonstrations. Emily Chebet, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
President William Ruto has shuffled his cabinet picks, swapping Soipan Tuya with Aden Duale. In a list presented by Speaker Moses Wetangula to Parliament, Soipan Tuya has been reassigned to the Defence Ministry, while Aden Duale now moves to the Environment docket. Stephen Leto reports, even as Rebecca Miano's name goes missing.
The surprise changes were made public by National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula when he delivered President William Ruto's communication on cabinet nominees to Parliament. Roslinda Soipan Tuya now heads to the busy defence docket if MPs give a nomination nod.
Order. 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 Honorable Rosalinda Soipan Tuya, AGH, Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Defence.
The one-time Garissa Township lawmaker Aden Duale leaves his defence docket to tackle climate change head-on should Parliament approve his nomination.
Order, honourable members. Order. Order. Honorable Aden Duale, AGH, Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry.
The surprise changes came even with more surprises. Rebecca Miano was nominated to take up the role of Attorney General and her name missing in the list to Parliament.
I hereby refer the message from the President together with the curriculum vitae of the nominees to the Committee on Appointments. Order, honourable members.
More questions emerged on the floor of the National Assembly on whether former cabinet secretaries who had already gone through vetting should be revetted on their suitability for their new dockets.
The Committee on Appointments is expected to immediately notify the nominees and the general public, commence the necessary approval hearings, and table its report in the House soonest.
President Ruto had promised to announce another list of cabinet nominees soon. Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.
Cracks within the ODM party continued to widen today after an apparently contentious plan to enter into an alliance with President William Ruto. Factions have emerged within the Orange Party, with ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna fronting the wing of the party, rejecting proposals to join President Ruto's cabinet, while another faction led by ODM Chairman John Mbadi favors cabinet appointments for the opposition party. Citizen TV's political affairs reporter Emmanuel Tor explains.
The yet-to-be-completed construction of the cabinet appears to expand the fault lines within the opposition ODM party, whose leader Raila Odinga flanked President William Ruto on the steps of the KICC when the head of state announced his plans to form what he called a broad-based government. But broad is the divide in ODM, growing with Party Secretary General Edwin Sifuna distancing the party from any plans to join the Kenya Kwanza administration. In a statement, Sifuna warned party members intending to join government of unspecified action. Sifuna's statement coming moments after Siaya Governor James Orengo trained his guns on those angling for the CS posts.
I am in total disagreement with James Agriole. He's my senior, he's my friend, but where he's wrong, I will tell him you are wrong.
The remarks by Orengo lifting the lead on a factional war within the ODM party.
You cannot tell us that we cannot dialogue, that we cannot talk with Ruto, we cannot talk as Kenyans. What is the alternative? We cannot play politics of populism. We cannot play politics of theory. We have been playing politics of theory since independence. That is why we have got these things wrong.
Within Parliament, the fault lines were more defined as some legislators were supporting joining government put the Secretary General on notice.
Because I don't want some confusion I've seen circulating. Somebody writing saying if members of the ODM party are appointed to government, they are going on their own. We met and resolved so. We want to tell people sending conflicting positions from the ODM to remember that they are on an interim position in those positions. We can remove them if we resolve a position and then they contradict it.
The legislators asking President Ruto to fast-track the naming of the opposition members in cabinet this week.
That within the week, as soon as tomorrow, we want to see those other appointments Baba was to forward to him. And we want all of them approved. And Honorable Speaker, if that can happen, then we are going to push this thing very fast.
The new developments come with reports indicating the president is finalizing his second batch of cabinet nominees and could name the balance this week. The cracks within the ODM party are expected to widen even further as the proponents of the broad-based political arrangement maintain that by joining cabinet, they will be able to change the fortunes of the country that has been battered by deadly protests for over a month now. Emmanuel Tor, Citizen TV, Nairobi.